So, what are your thoughts about where the Browns' offensive line is right now and how Andrew Berry moves forward in the draft with what the Browns need?
Yeah, I think it's obvious there's a pretty big hole still at left tackle. Um, and the rest of the spots are kind of accounted for in some capacity. It's just a matter of putting each guy in a certain spot. I actually asked Todd Monken about that yesterday. He's talked so much about wanting to have a quarterback sort of figured out before training camp, and if he wants the same sort of for the offensive line, and he kind of alluded to the idea that, like, yeah, that's probably fair, but he's going to let the situation kind of dictate itself. He always uses the line of the players decide who plays, not me. If whoever's playing the best is going to play certain places. So I do think that'll start to take shape throughout the spring. You'll get a better sense of where they're maybe thinking to play guys. I still wonder if lurking behind the scenes, if there's any thought of Joel Bitonio coming back, how he fits into that equation. At this point, I am kind of betting on him not coming back. But you never know, I guess. And so understanding that, I think it's a matter of then slotting guys into certain spots. So we'll see the timeline on that, but it does feel like it'll kind of coincide with the quarterback situation. And frankly, that makes a lot of sense because you want to get that sort of nailed down so they can start building chemistry with their quarterback. The same way that you want to get the quarterback figured out so they can start building chemistry with their receivers. In terms of the draft, though, and I mentioned the hole at left tackle, I do think, given what Andrew Berry said about that position, given what Tom Monken said about that position, I've looked a lot at Monroe Freeling and said that's the guy. And I think there's been others, Lomu from Utah, who's been a left tackle. I think for the Browns, if they're addressing the tackle spot in the draft, if that's part of their plan, I think it's very. I don't think they see positions. Like I think they don't see left tackle, right tackle. It's one or the other. Despite what happened with Jedrick Wills, they're not living in their fears that way, or at least Barry's not living in his fears because obviously Monken wasn't here for that. It feels like they're willing to draft a guy that's a right tackle and try to move him back to the left or move him to the left side if they think if they think they're getting the best player. So in that respect, like I'm not necessarily. I've kind of backed off the thought that they're definitely going to draft just a guy that plays left tackle, and I think it's going to be more open-ended than that. And given what the guys that they've signed, there's a lot of versatility with some of these players. I think they like that versatility in that position as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I still kind of come back to, I know there are really good wide receivers in this draft. I think you got to get a guy that makes Jerry Jeudy better, a guy that makes Harold Fannin better, Quinshon Judkins better. I don't know if that's Jeremiah Love. I don't know if that's Carnell Tate. I don't know if that's Mekhi Lemon. I think you need a skill position guy and not, I know there's going to be good ones. You need a guy that's towards the higher end of that because I'm looking at this offense. Yeah. As you look at that offense, Judkins is pretty good. Fannin's pretty good. If I'm a defensive coordinator, those are good players, but I'm not going, can't let Fannin get the ball or we're in trouble all game.
Yeah, listen, I think Fannin does have a chance to be really successful in this offense with Todd Monken, so I'm excited about year 2 of him. But listen, you always need more weapons. We saw last year the lack of weapons really hindered this offense. I'm fascinated to see how they grade these guys because there's a lot of people who are very hung up on it has to be Carnell Tate at 6. And the question I keep going back to is, like, if you're taking a receiver in the top 10, you're kind of accounting for them to be Jamar Chase, for example, or Justin Jefferson. I know Justin Jefferson was a later first-round pick, but that's kind of the thought process if you're taking a guy that early. And I don't know that I feel like Carnell Tate is undoubtedly going to be, Jamar Chase, for example. There's some people saying he could turn into like an elite number 2 one day. So maybe he's more of a T. Higgins. And so I just don't know if I feel like the pick has to be like a Carnell Tate there just because you need a wide receiver and he's the number 1 on the board. I think this class is good enough that you can wait on that. But I agree with you in the sense of, yes, you need to obviously address that position, and you probably need to address it in the first round with one of these players. And I do think there's some good names there that can be had even beyond just the top 10 where the Browns are obviously drafting first.